Thorsten Ludwig is the founder of the consultancy firm Bildungswerk Interpretation, ihre Adresse für Natur- und Kulturinterpretation in Deutschland, Österreich und der Schweiz. He was managing director of the European Association for Heritage Interpretations, Interpret Europe, and worked with the UNESCO project WH Interp. Today, he will talk about how to reach various target groups with different expectations, something a lot of you are currently struggling with, I can imagine. Please give him an applause. Thorsten Ludwig.
Yeah, good morning. Great to see all of you here, and great that you tackled these two subjects and tried to bring them together, heritage and tourism. I'm talking about engaging citizens and interpreting heritage in the 21st century today, and I would like to approach this through three questions, basically. Does it work? Yep. The first one is, what challenges do we face in the first half of the 21st century? I think we can make this rather quick because Celia already said something about it, and we are pretty aware of it. The second is, how can heritage interpretation help to meet these challenges? And the third, which might be most interesting for you, is what does this mean for the tourist experience at a heritage site? Before I go to these three questions, I have one which I would put on top. What is heritage interpretation? And I was hesitant to put it here because I'm pretty sure many of you know it, but it's always, if you have a conference and bringing people from different disciplines together, it's better to make sure we're on the same page. Very simply spoken, heritage interpretation enables people to make sense of heritage, not more and not less. But we can distinguish between information and interpretation. If you're talking about information, you can imagine that people perceive a place, perceive objects, and we explain that to them. So we work basically on the information, on the factual level at that point. But there's also some deeper meaning behind. Sten was talking about the narratives that we have around the site. And this means that we come to meaning, we enter the realm of ideas, basically. And if we enter this realm, we start to interpret things. And we can say that actually every heritage site we have is a product of interpretation. UNESCO wrote this 2 years ago, and we were quite amazed by it because, I mean, it's true. To put value on something, to defilter the stories of something means to interpret. And the result of this interpretation is that we decide to put a designation on a certain space and say, we want to protect this, we want to conserve this. So basically what we're talking about is we want heritage to become meaningful to people. Meaning aspect, this is what heritage distinguishes, what interpretation distinguishes it from information. So now, coming back to my questions, which I put, we offer courses, training courses, actually to enable people to do this, and we do this in different fields. So one field, of course, is to do personal interpretation. We distinguish between personal interpretation, and the other field is non-personal interpretation. And you all know the services we have around this. So what we try to do at Interpret Europe is to push it a little bit further and to go to the deeper meaning behind the things through all these services. And now to my questions. What challenges do we face in the 21st century? And I usually like to start with this picture of this bus, what probably many of you remember. We had a conference in Mechelen in 2016, Heritage Interpretation for the Future of Europe. And we were thinking of what would we like to discuss at this conference. And this was the time when this bus was rolling through the UK, and actually a wave of populism was rolling, Euroscepticism was rolling through Europe. You might remember this time. And we were considering why we have shared values in Europe if we are discussing on a level which is sometimes very far away from them. You all know we have in the preambles of all our documents at national level, at European level, all these terms are coming up over and over again. But what we in reality do is we have these self-transcendence values on the top of our value circle, but we basically live following the self-enhancement values, which are basically power, achievement, hedonism. So there is a discrepancy. And we were considering, if we're talking about heritage sites, is it just our job to inform people about what happened in the past, or shouldn't we more try to connect the people at the sites to these ideas and to these thoughts? So this was one aspect, and of course the other aspect, and Celia already talked about it, we are in this period of climate change. This picture was actually taken by our training coordinator in Greece 2 months ago. That was her favorite national park. It's gone for the next decades, and when she returned home to Volos, her town was flooded. And we cannot escape this. I mean, meanwhile, people realize it's getting closer and it's here. Yeah, so we have to tackle it in a way. And UNESCO says, of course, we tackle it in a more engineering way, but it's also a question of our mind. We all know the situation, but we cannot cope with it. So what can we do? UNESCO suggests that we learn for sustainability. And one point is the social and emotional learning dimension. And now look what they write. Build core values and attitudes for sustainability, cultivate empathy and compassion for other people and the planet, and motivate to lead the change. And the question is, where can this happen? So can it happen in schools? Can it happen in families? Or can it happen at heritage sites? So this is what we are dealing with now. Can heritage interpretation help to meet these challenges? Can we all do something about it? I split that up in 2 questions, and I already triggered the points. How can the experience of heritage inspire and empower people to make our future more peaceful and more sustainable? So the experience of heritage. And the second, how can we complement formal learning, which is more focused on knowledge and skills, with reflection on human values? Maybe you remember that nice video we've seen at the beginning with the children sitting in the school and then going out. And you realize immediately this is a completely another sphere of learning. This is a new world they're actually opening to themselves. So this is what we discussed here. What can heritage sites contribute to this? We call this fostering interpretive literacy, because we think that people, all of us, need to learn how to interpret in a responsible way. UNESCO calls it value-based heritage interpretation. It's a term which is around since 3 or 4 years, which basically is about how we can more foster the values of human values, basically, at the heritage sites. UNESCO wants us to create transformative experiences. They say raise awareness on the values of sustainability and help converting site experience into a transformative experience. That's a high claim, actually, because it has to do with, of course, this bigger than self values. How can we get the people more to what is written in our preambles and out of this lower part of the circle? And it means that we need to get across this mindfulness of ourselves, which is quite popular at the moment. There are mindfulness courses, so we know we want to strengthen our own, ourselves, but we also want to strengthen the mindfulness of others, and we want to strengthen, in the end, the mindfulness of the planet. So how can we expand this? Always keep in mind in site experiences at heritage sites. This is parallel to, Celia was talking a lot about the sustainability ideas, and this is in parallel to one of these favorite models of sustainability, you know, economy, ecology, and the social concerns. So the economic growth needs to consider the social aspects, and the economic and the social aspects need to consider the limitations we have, the planetary boundaries. So everything is limited by this. We need to be aware of this. There is no growth in the whatever. There is a limitation, and we have to accept that limitation. So these two circles, from my point of view, are in parallel. The one is developing a sustainable world, and the other is to develop the mindset for a sustainable world where we want to live in. Another aspect which was quite interesting in this point was how can heritage help us to build bridges? We did a study for a European Commission in preparation of the European Year of Cultural Heritage, which was basically about this. You see this value circle again, which I've shown you several times now, and you see on top, this top part says universalism. These are basically the values that are about peace, care for nature, care for each other. And you see these shaded parts in the circle to the right and to the left. The one is about, for example, caring for friends and family. The other is about caring for my self-esteem, caring for my own. People who foster caring for nature or caring for the peace in the world usually also care for friends and family and care for themselves. These are all scientific findings, so it's nothing what I'm making up at the moment. And now, if you look around at the circle, you might realize you have the security part at the bottom here. And if you transfer this idea to this part, you could say people who are in this security, law and order, okay, law and order people, I know say, are in this sector. Yes, they emphasize power, but they also emphasize tradition, and there might be a link in this way. We are talking about heritage, we're talking about a lot about tradition, conservation. The question is, how do we interpret it? And we might be able to create this link into these target groups, which are usually quite far from what we are talking about. Yeah? So we might have the opportunity at heritage sites to reach groups which are usually difficult to reach at the moment. And I can only say in Germany, we have a split in society basically from an elite preaching some things and the wider public not really following. Yeah? So how to bridge that gap? That was this question we were dealing about. We got the Altiero Spinelli Prize for this from the European Union, considerable amount, which helped us as a little organization very much. So they acknowledged this as a starting point in the European Year of Cultural Heritage 2018. You can find the study in the material section of our website. If you take a picture, you have the link in, but you can find it easily. The other point was, or for us, the question is very important, what relevance does all of this now have for the bigger organizations? And I have a quote which is it's a guiding star for us at the moment for our work. And this is from a study from the Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe of UNESCO. So this is not UNESCO Paris, okay? It's a smaller department, but they wrote the duty related to education through value-based heritage interpretation, the term they introduced, should form the core mandate of the visitor centers in UNESCO-designated sites. UNESCO-designated sites include World Heritage Sites, UNESCO Biosphere Reserves, global geoparks. So all of them should have value-based heritage interpretation as their core mandate. And we were like, wow, that's great. And at the same moment, how can we get there? Because that's a high ambition. But that's what we're working at the moment. This is in this report. So again, if you take the picture, the role of visitor centers in UNESCO-designated sites was a report from an international workshop in Bamberg where they came up with this thought, and this is our driving force since a few years. As I said, we are offering training courses on heritage interpretation, and we have a course, for example, for guides, or a course for writers, where you learn how to develop panels and labels for museums, or a course how you can plan for your whole site. It just took place in Peterborough, one certified interpretive planner course. And UNESCO asked us to adapt these courses to this idea of value-based heritage interpretation. So this is what we did the last 2 years. This is a course here in Montenegro. We had another one in Slovenia on behalf of UNESCO, where we invited managers from World Heritage Sites, only from World Heritage Sites, and we're working with them together on interpretive planning, which had much to do now with participation, stakeholder involvement, going to the local communities, cooperating, all the things Celia was talking about before. So this is what we really wanted to emphasize, and we're glad that we now finished this transformation of our training program, which means we can go for the next step together with UNESCO to distribute it in Europe and to find organizations actually who run these courses to improve what we do. To improve what we do brings me to my last question. So what does this mean for tourist experiences of heritage sites? We should be aware that heritage sites offer a huge number of advantages. I'd really put just a few here on the sheet. One is there are iconic points of reference. Dean already pointed this out. They are always experienced as relevant. So whoever comes there, even if people are just ticking their bucket lists, the place is relevant. They want to be there. They want to take their picture at least. Okay, so we have this very good bonus point as a start, which is different from the school. You know, you saw the picture at the beginning. You do not necessarily everybody wants to be at school every day. The offer to have stories, values, frames. Again, Steen raised what stories, what narratives are around heritage sites. There are a lot. And it is our task now to filter what are the stories that are relevant in the context, what I was explaining before. The revelations encouraging dealing with new ideas. If we manage that people are provoked at a heritage site and that something very interesting is revealed to them, they suddenly open up their minds, yeah, for a short moment. But in this moment, we can do something with them. Usually you're very mechanized in what you're doing, going there, taking your pictures and doing your job at the heritage site. Now suddenly you're excited, you're open, you need to react. So we should use this, and at the same time, we have to do with people who are very different from us. Okay, so if we're an accidental travel group, we meet people we would not meet before. Maybe we would also not like to meet them, but we are together for, and that's also important, a temporary time, only a short time. So we can leave again. So we can get in an exchange about values and these things, even in debates, they should be well facilitated, and then we can leave again. And it is not that we need to marry these people. So you know, we can get in exchange without being forced to stay together. And the last but not least is that experiences result in our long-lasting memories. That's the reason why we are limited here to 20 minutes talking, because you should experience and exchange, because this is much deeper than watching the slides. And if I would ask you, can you remember when was your first heritage experience in your life? Some of you might go decades back and remember it as if it had been yesterday. So we really should value this direct experience of heritage sites. Or some of these experiences, people keep them for life. Yeah? So it's a huge advantage compared to sitting in a university or sitting in a classroom. Of course, on the other hand, people have another agenda. They have their own idea why they are at a place and what they want to do. So we need to think, how can we reach them? And I must say that we more and more get away from this older idea of segmentation of target groups, so that we say, okay, these people expect this, these people expect that. This works well if we want to give them information. But I said in the beginning, we do not want to give them information in the first place. We want them to encourage them to think. So we are more going to this idea of universal concepts at the moment. What I mean with universal concepts is these are concepts that everybody of us shares in a way. Family is one of them, okay? So everybody of us has a relation to family. It must not be a positive in any case, but it is there, it has a relation. So we are surrounded by many of these universal concepts. There are really many. I just picked a few. The general work was from anthropology, and I think they defined 160. So there are a lot. And if we manage to grab these universal concepts at our heritage sites and make them the focus on what we're dealing about, it's not so much about the target groups, because basically all the people we have in our group, no matter where they come from, what cultural, social background, they are touched by this and they are pulled into it. So this is our basic way how we usually work. That's obviously easier in sites that are already sensitive, so we have these big things going on and we can help to use them. And it obviously requires some skills we might not have before. If you consider a guide, a city guide, it's not so much about organized information anymore. It is more about how the guide can ask people, involve people, facilitate the experience. So it's much more going about facilitation, and on the other hand, the visitors are not just people listening, but we want them to have a say, we want them to involve them, which requires more and other skills. And it gets even more challenging if we are talking about non-personal interpretation, where we are not in a constant dialogue with the people. It is possible, but we need to switch a little bit our minds. This is just an example from an exhibition where they brought different opinions of different people together. So multi-perspective approach is very important to show it's not just one truth at a heritage site. This is a very nice example at the former Iron Curtain. You might remember the Iron Curtain was lifted the first time between Hungary and Austria with a pan-European picnic, they called it at that time. Today there is a pan-European picnic park at that site, and these three people are all Hungarians, one from Civil Action Group, one from the local government, one was the commander of the soldiers who were supposed to shoot when they were entering the border. These three guys are friends today, and you can imagine what power it has that these local people here are now discussing together with tourists what their concerns were. It's a dream to have such a situation, but if you think a little bit about your heritage sites in your surroundings, what are the witnesses of things that happened at that time, at that place? You can find them, and you can connect this in a way. This is a project, and it's the last I show you, we had in Germany, in Düsseldorf, town of Düsseldorf. The idea was to develop a nature trail, and we were asked by our client, the classical way, okay, to set up 40 panels, which had birds, and it was renaturation of a part of the River Rhine, so a renaturation project. And we made a study, and we realized that most people who were there were not tourists, but were people who were really walking their dogs there, so they were basically there all the time. So we suggested to go into a co-creation process instead. First thing those people told us, whatever you do, do not set up panels and boards and signs and stuff, which was difficult because as a European project, funding was already there for the signs and boards and panels, so what to do now? And this was a very, very nice process which happened then with people with very different backgrounds from different quarters of the town of Düsseldorf. A very simple result, it looks like. Okay, it says Garata stories. Garat is one of the quarters of the town of Düsseldorf, where almost only migrants are living. Now, they are telling stories about changes in their life, which are connected to the changes in the surroundings in the renaturated river. So we are really linking natural heritage to very contemporary issues we have. And people can phone there and listen to these stories. And I tell you, they are, the visitors coming from somewhere are more interested in these stories than at any panel showing you the birds and the surroundings, whatever. So they really connect to this place at that point through the tools these people developed. We had a lot of those tools which I cannot introduce here, but we felt it was half a year, it took us half a year, but it was really worth to do this effort and to co-create something together with the people. Value-based heritage interpretation emphasizes interpretation by the people, so we want to include visitors and local people. This is from the Grand Place in Brussels. So people enjoy heritage sites, not always in the way like we think they might want to, whatever, but they're sitting there together with a bottle of wine in the middle of the square, so they enjoy to be there in the middle of heritage. And our question is, how can we make the most of it in terms of what we want to achieve? Interpretation is not an occasional luxury, but our fundamental way of being in the world. And our question is now, can heritage interpretation also be such a fundamental way for people of being in the world? So I finish. Just if you want to know more, there is an Inspiration Day on 4th of December here in Belgium. It's organized by our country team from Belgium. Our country coordinator is Leila de Bruyn. She's also here throughout the conference. You will remember the name if you're standing with a, what do you call it, Red Devils? So, Leila de Bruyn, and you will find her on the list. And if you want to know more and want to get in contact with us, do it through them. I disappear at noon. She will be here all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thorsten. Very interesting. And before we'll have a break, one more question for you. You know the drill by now. And this time we would like to have a word, not just yes or no, but a word answering following question. What are methods to involve the local community, indigenous peoples and traditional owners in a meaningful way? What are methods to involve the local community, indigenous peoples and traditional owners in a meaningful way? Any word will do. We already have got 3 responses, and they're coming up more. and we will use this word cloud after the break. Maybe we can put the code back on so that you have the time to choose a word. And we will be back after the break. Eerst is er dus pauze van een goed half uur tot 11:30. Koffie staat klaar hier beneden in de marmeren zaal. U kunt ook even ademhappen op het Flamingoplein. Er zijn weliswaar geen flamingo's, maar pelikanen kunt u daar wel spotten op dit moment. En om 11:30 ten laatste verwachten we u allemaal hier opnieuw terug voor het plenaire debat. Dank jullie wel. Tot zo.